How do you think being from a small town in Oregon affects your views on issues that affect entire nations?
I think a couple of ways. One is that the small town Oregon really seems to me kind of central to what the United States is, and so when I go to other countries, I also do really think that it's important to get out of the capital and go to the equivalent of Yamhill, Oregon, which just means getting out of the capital, talking to people who aren't university educated, who don't speak English. I think that also in covering American politics, that I think that it has helped to come from a area that has quite rural, quite conservative values, that is kind of on the fringe of the Bible Belt, if you will. I think my Sunday column, for example, was about evangelicals in foreign policy, and I think I'm probably more open to, although I disagree with evangelicals theologically and on most political issues, I think I'm more open to their influence because, I grew up in an area that was full of evangelical churches.
You've traveled extensively throughout the world. In what specific ways do you think we all share the same values, and in what way do differences in backgrounds truly divide us?
All of the above. One's always reminded in traveling of our common humanity, parents' fears for their children, I remember at one point, one of my first trips to Cambodia, maybe in the mid-90s, and somebody had just told me how Cambodians, because child mortality is so high and parents were losing so many children, that it was just something that people got used to and accepted. And then I happened to be walking through the forest, and I heard these just unearthly screams. And I came across a father who had, just a couple of hours before, lost his son to malaria. And that grief was just as wrenching as it would be for any American to lose their child. Having said that, it's also clear that there are true cultural differences, and in the space that the book covers, the role of women, I think that we sometimes have the misperception that this is really a gender battle between men and women, and it's not. The best predictor of who's in favor of wife beating in a society isn't whether you're male or female. It's your level of education and whether you live in a city or rural area. And women often are just as likely to think that wife beating or girls not getting educated is the right thing as men are likely to think. And there really are different, in that respect, really are different cultural values. I tend to think we psych ourselves out too much about the fact that people have different religious or cultural values. China, after all, had foot binding for hundreds of years. That was a deeply embedded cultural value, and it disappeared very, very quickly. Went from nearly universal or very, very widespread to non-existent over the course of about 20 years. And the same can be done with girls not getting educated, for example.
So, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you on your journalistic travels?
My first trip to Congo began with a plane crash, and that was quite scary because we knew we were going to have to crash land, and in fact there was a body dangling from the undercarriage of the plane. and we couldn't dump fuel. We had about a half an hour before we crash landed, so that was quite scary. But then that was followed up by, I decided after that experience to try to drive out of Congo, and then promptly ran into a Tutsi warlord who was busy slaughtering Hutus, and was not happy about my arrival on the scene. So for the next week, he chased me through the jungle until we got to Uganda, and then to top it off, in the course of that, I got the most lethal kind of malaria. So that was a tough trip.
Yeah, sounds like it.